Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs, and welcome to Robservations, the show about something. I am your Royster Doyster, your Duke of Divine Discourse? How about that? Your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, your Master of Fun and Wonder, your existential Mr. Rogers, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett, and welcome to Robservations, episode number 309. And I certainly have something to talk about today. Yes, I do. But first, off the top, something kind of cool. I'm going to start doing cool things like this. So we have today imagination connoisseur Mr. David Miller. And David Miller sent this in. It's on the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery on the Burnettwork.net website. This is his, well, let me just read this. He says, this is a fun little illustration of the Fantastic Four cosplaying as the original Star Wars characters to go watch the movie Star Wars in its first run. The Fantastic Four is not just my favorite Marvel comic, but my favorite comic series, period. And having a symbolic team-up between them and the genius that was the original Star Wars films is just a fun idea I wanted to play out on ink and paper. It's just a fun, simple cartoon that's pretty self-explanatory. Hope y'all get a giggle out of it. That is from David Neil Miller, and he is an indie writer, illustrator, and cartoonist currently doing the Frankenstein Zombie series for Marcosia Publishing, which is available on Comixology now. Now, just so you all know, full disclosure, he didn't pay me to say that. He just sent that in. He put it up on the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery on the Burnettwork.net website, and I thought it was cool. And I love the illustration, so I wanted to mention it. I just want to make sure that, look, if somebody wants to pay me to feature their work, I would do so, but I would also tell you that that's what I was doing. I want to be clear, Mr. Miller's work, I wanted to show it because I liked it. It tickled me. It made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. So today, I'm always trying to look for topics. Like, what is interesting to talk about in the world of the imagination connoisseur today? Well, there was an article that started burning up Twitter that was from The Independent in Britain. And the author of this article tweeted this out. Alexandra Pollard. I can't say it was a pleasure to interview Terry Gilliam. And then, of course, the headline, Terry Gilliam interview, I'm tired of white men being blamed for everything. Now, this is the same Alexandra Pollard who earlier in 2019 tweeted this out about her interview with Armie Hammer. I interviewed Armie Hammer, and it was quite an experience. Armie Hammer says, straight white maleness is threatening to everyone. Same author, Alexandra Pollard. Different takes. Obviously, I'm sure the interviews were full of different things. But I didn't find this Armie Hammer interview right away. I had to go look for it after, of course, I read the article she wrote on Mr. Terry Gilliam. Now, as many people know, Terry Gilliam is, of course, from Monty Python. And after that, he became a filmmaker, beginning with Monty Python. And then his first non-Monty Python film was Time Bandits. He moved on, and of course, he did things like Brazil, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, The Fisher King, of course, which I love. And he tried to get The Man Who Killed Don Quixote off the ground for a long, long, long time. Finally did it with Jonathan Pryce. You can see Lost in La Mancha, which is one of the great documentaries about getting a movie made or unmade. He went up against Universal Brass when they took Brazil away from him and recut it. Terry Gilliam has had an over 50-year career in the entertainment business. And so I was very curious to, of course, read the article that that Alexandra Pollard wrote about Terry Gilliam. And I was very curious. Obviously, it has a very clickbaity headline. So I wanted to share that with you. And then I wanted to share the Armie Hammer article as well. So this was the Saturday interview. on The Independent today. Terry Gilliam, the headline is, "I'm tired of white men being blamed for everything wrong with the world." After 2 decades of trying, the director and former Monty Python member has finally managed to make The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, but he'd rather talk to Alexandra Pollard about #MeToo, the trials of being a white man, and why he's decided to become a, quote, black lesbian in transition. Now, I read this and I'm like, oh no, here it comes. Now, full disclosure, while Terry Gilliam's output as a director has always been very hit and miss for me. I liked Time Bandits when I saw it. I, of course, loved Brazil, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which had a very tortured production, as did Brazil, actually, in the edit room. Terry Gilliam actually started a campaign, a very vocal and visible campaign in the press to have his own cut of the movie released. I believe he was going up against then Universal honcho Sid Sheinberg. So Terry Gilliam has never had an easy career. He's fought the good fight for a long time. He's been outspoken. He's very iconoclastic. And so I was curious to see what Terry Gilliam was going to say. So this is the article that Alexandra Pollard wrote. That was, of course, in The Independent today. By his own admission, Terry Gilliam is offensive. But it's not his fault. It's yours. Quote, "People work so hard to be offended now," he says with a grin. "I don't know why I'm doing it. It's not fun anymore." He seems to be enjoying himself today, though. The more incendiary his opinion that the #MeToo movement is a witch hunt, that white men are the real victims, that actually it's women who hold all the power, the bigger that smile. We're in his publicist's London offices to discuss Gilliam's new film, The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. But the 79-year-old writer, director, and former Monty Python member has other ideas. "I'm so bored of talking about the film," he groans, rolling up the sleeves of a maroon overshirt, which has a cut not dissimilar to a posh dressing gown. With gray hair cut short, except for a long rat's tail around the back and a weathered face, he looks his age. Just about. But he has sharp, keen eyes and the air, energy, and trainers of a man many years younger. You'd think, given that he's been trying to make his magical realist adaptation of Cervantes' 1605 novel for nearly 2 decades, he'd be itching to talk about it. The film's journey to completion has been so troubled. There were lawsuits, funding failures, collapsed distribution deals, natural disasters, that a documentary was made about it in 2002. Gilliam even started filming back in 2000 with Johnny Depp and Jean Roquefort in lead roles. But production was abandoned on day 2 when a flood wiped out the set and Roquefort's back went into spasm. He's had other setbacks in the meantime. Heath Ledger, the star of his 2009 film The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, died midway through filming and was replaced by a handful of A-listers. And his 2013 sci-fi film The Zero Theorem flopped spectacularly. But his early years were an embarrassment of riches. After starting out as an animator for Monty Python, he's responsible for those surreal Dali-esque collages and that famous giant foot. Gilliam soon joined the troupe full-time, the only American-born member among 5 Brits. His directorial debut was with them, 1975's riotous Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And he helped write the equally adored, though not by Catholics, Life of Brian in 1979. And when the Pythons slithered their separate ways, he kept on going, making work that was weird and fantastical, shot through with dark comedy and dystopian undertones. 12 Monkeys with Brad Pitt, for example, and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas in 1998 with Johnny Depp. But his masterpiece is surely 1985's Brazil, an Orwellian dystopian satire starring Jonathan Pryce as Sam Lowry, a low-level government worker trying to find the woman of his dreams, literally. Gilliam teamed up with Pryce again for The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, which finally got off the ground thanks to a large cash injection, which he says came from a woman who identified with, quote, "my jihad, mein Kampf," unquote. It is a beguiling film. Price plays Javier, an elderly man who believes himself to be Don Quixote, and Adam Driver is Toby, an arrogant advertising director who triggered Javier's delusion by casting him in his student film a decade ago. Don Quixote is a madman, says Gilliam, who has reluctantly deigned to talk about the film for a moment, but his view of the world is a noble one. It's about chivalry. It's about rescuing maidens. All these wonderful ideas. The film flits between the 17th century and the 21st. Is it about the clash between the modern masculinity and the old-fashioned ideals of manhood? There's no room for modern masculinity, I'm told, says Gilliam. The male gaze is over, he adds, letting his derisive air quotes hover for a moment. He was trying to make a point with Angelica, though, played by Joanna Ribeiro. Angela is a young woman who was in Toby's film when she was 15. He told her she could be a star, but hasn't spoken to her in the years since, and her attempts to make good on his prediction have failed. Now she works as a model and an escort. In the age of, quote, Me Too, here's a girl who takes responsibility for her state, says Gilliam. Whatever happened in this character's life, she's not accusing anybody. We're living in a time where there's always somebody responsible for your failures, and I don't like this. I want people to take responsibility and not just constantly point a finger at somebody else saying, you've ruined my life. The day we meet, Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein, who's been accused by dozens of women of rape, assault, and sexual harassment, allegations that kickstarted the entire #MeToo movement, broke his silence to lament the fact that his work has been forgotten and to boast that he is a pioneer of female-led films. Isn't it a bigger problem that men are refusing to take responsibility for abusing women and abusing their power? Gilliam says, no. When you have power, you don't take responsibility for abusing others. You enjoy the power. That's the way it works in reality. And then the phrase comes up, witch hunt. Yeah, I said #MeToo is a witch hunt, he says. There's a silence. There is a silence, and I'm sure there's a silence now. There are many victims in Harvey's life. I had to look at this. I had to be clear about what he was saying. There are many victims in Harvey's life, he adds, and I feel sympathy for them. But then, Hollywood is full of very ambitious people who are adults and they make choices. We all make choices, and I could tell you who did make the choice and who didn't. I hate Harvey. I had to work with him, and I know the abuse. But I don't want people saying that all men. Because on the 1991 film The Fisher King, 2 producers were women. One was a really great producer. The other was a neurotic bitch. It wasn't about their sex. It was about the position of power and how people use it. Being neurotic and being an alleged rapist are not the same thing, though. Many women have made very legitimate accusations against many powerful men, Gilliam says, and those are true. But the idea that this is such an important subject you cannot find anything humorous about it is wrong. Gilliam mentions a famous actor he was speaking to recently. She has got her story of being in the room and talking her way out. She says, I can tell you all the girls who didn't, and I know who they are, and I know the bumps in their careers. The point is, you make choices. I can tell you about a very well-known actress coming up to me and saying, what do I have to do to get in your film, Terry? I don't understand why people behave as if this hasn't been going on as long as there have been powerful people. I understand that men have had power longer, but I'm tired as a white male of being blamed for everything that's wrong with the world. He holds up his hands. I didn't do it. It is deeply frustrating to argue with Gilliam. He is both the devil and his advocate. I try to say that it's not that white men are to blame for everything, but they are born with certain privileges that, too often, they exploit. He interrupts. It's been so simplified, is what I don't like. When I announce that I'm a black lesbian in transition, people take offense at that. Why? Because you're not. Why am I not? How are you saying that I'm not? Are you? You've judged me and decided that I was making a joke. You can't identify as black, though. Okay, here it is. Go on Google, type in the name Gilliam. Watch what comes up. What's going to come up? The majority are black people, so maybe I'm half black. I just don't look it. But earlier, he described himself as a white male. I don't like the term black or white. I'm now referring to myself as a melanin light male. I can't stand the simplistic, tribalistic behavior that we're going through at the moment. He smiles. I'm getting myself in deeper water, so I have to trust you. I'm not sure what he's trusting me to do. I'm talking about being a man accused of all the wrong in the world because I'm white-skinned. So I better not be a man. I better not be white. Okay, since I don't find men sexually attractive, I gotta be a lesbian. What else can I be? I like girls. Those are just logical steps. They don't seem logical. I'm just trying to make you start thinking. You see, this is the world I grew up in. And with Monty Python, we could do this stuff. And we weren't offending people. We were giving people a lot of laughter. He's right about that. But at best, Python was silly and whimsical. Its more pointed satirical moments punching up, not down. At its worst, it missed the mark, objectifying women when it wasn't depicting them as shrill and preposterous, and using racial slurs that would rightly horrify people today. Gilliam doesn't see the difference. I'm into diversity more than anybody, he says, but diversity in the way you think about the world, which means you can hate what I just said. That's fine, no problem. I mean, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but fundamentalism always ends up being you have to attack other people who are not like you. And that's what makes me crazy. Life is fantastic. It's wonderful. It's so complex. Enjoy it and play with it and have fun. That's why I didn't become a missionary. That was my plan. I was quite the little zealot when I was young, but when their God couldn't take a joke, I thought, this is stupid. Who would want to believe in a God that can't laugh? His publicist comes back into the room to tell us our time is up. We didn't talk about the film even once, he tells her, with the glee of a schoolboy telling on his classmate. I get up to leave. I don't know how you got stuck with me in this mood, he says. I just love arguing, and if you've got a point, you should be able to argue your thing. That grin is back, but I'm not going to hit you. And that was the article. And I read this, and then I went back, and I looked at what she had tweeted out with the link to the article, which was, I can't say it was a pleasure to interview Terry Gilliam. The thing that made me sort of upset about this is that Terry Gilliam is somebody worthy of respect. Somebody who has been for over half a century now out there making his artwork, fighting the good fight, doing things that Herculean tasks, getting Munchausen made. If you read that, my God, if you read about what he went through to fight for his version of Brazil, the man who killed Don Quixote, all of these things, he has been a person who has stuck to his guns and worked his ass off for the better part of 50 years. He sits down with an interviewer who immediately, the first thing she says about him when this article is published is that it wasn't a pleasure to sit down with Terry Gilliam. I mean, I took journalism. I took it in high school. I took it in college. I started writing for my high school newspaper. I've written for a number of publications. I was the critic at large for Sci-Fi Universe magazine. My first television pundit job was on SF Vortex on the Sci-Fi Channel in the late 90s. I've been a documentarian. I've sat down with all kinds of people that work in the entertainment business. And there have been people that I've liked, and there have been people that I haven't liked. But whenever I've presented anything that I've either written or made a documentary about, I've never led into that documentary by saying that it was not a pleasure to sit down with the subject that I sat down with. And it sort of made me sad. And I think what's really interesting is watching the Twitter outrage over Terry Gilliam. I've seen friends of mine, I've seen people that I respect their work, talking about how Terry Gilliam is basically canceled as far as they're concerned. And I read this and I was thinking to myself, And I went back to that final article, or the final paragraph in the article, where he says, I'm into diversity more than anybody, But diversity in the way you think about the world, which means you can hate what I just said, that's fine, no problem. I mean, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but fundamentalism always ends up being you have to attack other people who are not like you, and that's what makes me crazy. Life is fantastic. It's wonderful. It's so complex. Enjoy it, play with it, and have fun. That's why I didn't become a missionary. That was my plan. I was quite the little zealot when I was young. But when their God couldn't take a joke, I thought, who would want to believe in a God that can't laugh? Now, to me, the whole point of my channel is to say, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. Now, what I meant also, what's part of that, is that you need to start listening to them and really hear what they're saying and try and understand where they're coming from, where they lived, where they grew up, all of the things that shaped whatever it is that they've told you. And then hopefully, when you share, if you're in some capacity to do so, whether you've made a film, whether you've written an article, I would hope that you would at least respect the person who shared with you their thoughts, whether you agree with them or not. They sat down and they shared something with you. They risked their own, I don't know what you want to call it, but they risk their own opinions, their own points of view. Now, it's okay. You can disagree with that point of view. You can even write an article destroying that person, pillorying them all you want. But at least afford that person the respect. And if you're a journalist of their sharing, and if you're a journalist, your article should present information and allow people to make up their own minds. If you're a good writer and you want to convey a certain point of view, hopefully you can do that. But to lead off an article and say that it wasn't a pleasure to sit down with your subject is doing that person a great disservice, and it is also destroying your own credibility as an interviewer. Because who wants to sit down with you knowing that they might risk, as Terry Gilliam said, he was trusting her to get her ire. Now, what's really interesting is she also wrote an article with actor Armie Hammer. And as I pointed out earlier on, Armie Hammer, I interviewed Armie Hammer, and it was quite an experience. Let's look at Armie Hammer. And now let's look at Terry Gilliam. Do you notice anything about them? Well, they're different kinds of men, surely. They're both white men who talk about straight white maleness. But it was very disconcerting to see Terry Gilliam, somebody that I respect, and Armie Hammer, someone else I respect, be disrespected by the very same journalist who sat down with both of them. And I'm not saying why, but it's certainly an interesting counterpoint looking at the two of them, especially if you pay attention to how Alexandra Pollard talked about both of them in her introductory remarks, which I'm going to read this article about Armie Hammer that she wrote. Armie Hammer interview. Straight white maleness is threatening to everyone who is not a straight white male. Armie Hammer has his feet up. By the way, this is again an article by Alexandra Pollard. It was published Thursday, the 21st of February, 2019 in The Independent again. Armie Hammer has his feet up on the table, leaning far back on a chair, his fingers interlocked. The 32-year-old is musing on straight white male privilege. How do straight white men, he begins, react to other straight white men who are no longer acting how they believe straight white men should act? Every time he says those words, straight white men, he overpronounces the T's, enunciating the words as if they're bitter on his tongue. And that is exercising your straight white male privilege, of all things that straight white men not only take for granted, but also are expected to capitalize on. We're in a London hotel room, the exact same London hotel room in which the American actor stayed a decade ago while he was shooting his breakout role as both Winklevoss twins in Aaron Sorkin's The Social Network. I know this because he was announcing it when I arrived, staring broodingly out of the window with his hands on his hips, a stance that would perfectly suit his very tenuously rumored role as the next Batman, which he obviously didn't get. Last year, after starring alongside Timothée Chalamet in the intoxicating gay romance Call Me By Your Name, Hammer appeared on the New York stage performing in young Jean Lee's play Straight White Men. Clearly, it had an effect on him. If you see a straight white man not acting like that, not assuming his privilege, in a way, it's very threatening to your straight white maleness, he continues. But at the end of the day, what is straight white maleness if not threatening to everyone else who is not a straight white man? If you stop assuming your privilege, the only people you harm are the people who are actively taking advantage of it. Cerulean-eyed, 6'5", and preposterously handsome, she writes, Hammer himself could probably breeze through the world with just about every privilege on tap. His great-grandfather and namesake, Armand Hammer, was a wealthy oil tycoon whose name is plastered over Los Angeles. In a Hollywood Reporter profile, he drove the journalist past the Armand Hammer golf course. And he grew up in fucking paradise on the Cayman Islands. Does he ever find himself exploiting his privilege still? Yeah, I mean, there's things all the time that I catch myself doing. Case in point, sitting here with my feet on the table, he says, suddenly offended by himself. I mean, like, I'm just being comfortable and relaxed, but, like, there are things all the time that I catch myself doing, and I think, wait a second, is this white privilege? Yeah, I think it is. Look at what I'm doing. Yeesh. His size, 15 feet. Stay on the table. In 2016, Hammer starred in Nate Parker's The Birth of a Nation, a film about a slave rebellion in 1831. The film was initially acclaimed before rape allegations against Parker cast an irreparable shadow over it. Next came Call Me By My Name, with its tender depiction of queer masculinity, and a year later, Boots Riley's chilling anti-capitalist race satire Sorry to Bother You. Now he's playing Martin Ginsburg, husband of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in On the Basis of Sex. The film begins with Bader Ginsburg's arrival at Harvard Law School, where she was one of 9 women among roughly 500 men, and ends with a historic court case that began to topple the sexism ingrained in the United States legislation. As Martin, a tax lawyer who works with his wife on the case, Hammer proudly plays second fiddle to Jones's Ruth. That's Felicity Jones. To the film's potential financiers, it was alien to see such a supportive on-screen husband. Screenwriter Daniel Stiepelman recently disclosed that backers offered to fund the film only if Martin was rewritten as angrier or less understanding. Maybe he should threaten to divorce his wife if she didn't drop the case. I must admit, I say, I was waiting for Martin to have some sort of emasculated strop over his wife's brilliance. Oh, then your mind is not as dark as mine, he says, because as I was reading it, I was like, this guy seems amazing. This guy's incredible. This guy's such a fantastic husband and father. He must be a serial killer. This is Ted Bundy. Hammer was pleasantly surprised when he reached the end and the body count was still 0 and the couple were still a force to be reckoned with. They had pure equality in their relationship, when not only was it not the done thing, he says, but it was the farthest thing from what was expected. There was a storied history of men are the mammoth hunters who go to work and women stay home and cook and clean and take care of the children. But in reality, if you look at that time, yeah, men went to work, but they were terribly dysfunctional, and the women stayed home and were upset about the pigeonhole they'd been put in. There's a reason that prescription pills were so highly prescribed at the time, and men were all basically high-functioning alcoholics. And then this goes on and on and on, this article, and I'm going to put links to each article in the live chat. Here is the Army Hammer live chat. Here's the Army Hammer article, and I will give you the Terry Gilliam article. And I would encourage you all to read both of these articles and read how they are written and how they portray both of their subjects. And take particular note of Alexandra, how old she appears to be, and take into consideration the difference between the subjects that she's interviewing. Now, my whole thing about life is anyone who lives in the 21st century is privileged. We all are. And as Yuval Harari points out in his book Sapiens, that I talk about all the time, we live in a time where, despite the fact that we might be going to war with Iran soon, we live in a time where there is less war, there is less famine, there is less poverty than there has ever been before. Now, does that mean that there's no poverty? Of course not. I live in California. 50% of all the homeless people in the United States live in this city, or in this state, and in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego. So I'm well aware of the differences in our lives. But I think what's really important, what's really the thing that we have to most be aware of, is that we are an evolving species. And it is our duty, I think, to our fellow beings on this planet to always be aware of where we came from and understand our history before we start pillaring people today. You have to understand where people's experiences derived from and all of that. And, it's funny I understand Armie Hammer. It's interesting because Call Me By Your Name, he's in Straight White Men on Broadway. The man was born into an unbelievably wealthy family. He's 6'5". He's incredibly handsome, and he has size 15 feet. I would say Mr. Hammer grew up the very definition of privilege. And certainly, he hasn't had to fight the artistic fights in his life yet that Terry Gilliam has. Terry Gilliam, who's deep into his 70s, and Armie Hammer is in his 30s. And yet, this journalist was far more, I would say, in awe of Armie Hammer than she was with Terry Gilliam. And it was disconcerting to read and contrast both of those articles about two men, two very privileged white men, I guess, that I admire. I've been an Armie Hammer fan since I saw The Social Network. I thought he was incredible as the Winklevoss twins, and I thought he was amazing in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. as Ilya Kuryakin. And Terry Gilliam has been very hit and miss for me. Very hit and miss. But, I mean, if nothing else, he's been his own creative entity. He's been an amazing creator for his entire career. And coming from Monty Python, you have to understand, Alexander does cite in the article what Monty Python was all about, and all about the irreverence and all the craziness that went on there. But I just don't think, after reading both of these articles, there are some thoughts that I will keep to myself about why she treated her subjects the way that she did. And I really was disappointed to read the lead-in that she gave to the article about Terry Gilliam, which immediately says that, why isn't it a pleasure to meet Terry Gilliam? Why isn't it an honor? There are people that have lived very storied lives, and they're very different, and they have diversity. And I think when you sit down, again, with somebody, anybody, you might not agree with what they have to say, but it is a privilege to sit down and hear anyone's story. And I think if they agree to sit down with you, and you get to interview somebody, and you get to have them tell you a story or tell you a tale of their lives, and you have to listen, you have to really listen. I think it's really important that before somebody is immediately judged by you based on maybe an agenda that you yourself have, you have to remember to give people the kind of respect they deserve. And I think one of the reasons that our society is where we're at now is because we don't take into consideration the account that everybody has a different kind of a life. Terry Gilliam might have been, raised a cis white male, or was able to have that kind of privilege, but he is a man that in his own career has fought the good fight and has not had it easy in Hollywood. And I think he's somebody that should be respected for what he's been through and what he's gone through and the battles that he has fought. And it was just, I was upset to see that lead off, the way that article was tweeted out by the author, by Alexandra. It was irksome to read. And that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about. that was my subject to discuss today. Now, I have a lot more to discuss, obviously. I have letters, but there was one more thing that I read that I wanted to share with you in this new year. And I really thought it was worth sharing. And this was from Matthew Jones, and it was on Inc. I-N-C period. And this article, 20 brutal truths about life no one wants to admit. And I like this. I'm going to read them. They're quick. Number 1, you're going to die, and you have no idea when. Stop pretending you're invincible. Acknowledge the fact of your own mortality, then start structuring your life in a more meaningful way. Number 2, everyone you love is going to die, and you don't know when. This truth may be saddening at first, but it also gives you permission to make amends with past difficulties and reestablish meaningful relationships with important figures in your life. 3, your material wealth won't make you a better or happier person. Even if you're one of the lucky ones who achieves his or her materialistic dreams, money only amplifies that which was already present. 4, your obsession with finding happiness is what prevents its attainment. Happiness is always present in your life. It's just a matter of connecting to it and allowing it to flow through you. That's challenging. 5, donating money does less than donating time. Giving your time is a way to change your perception and create a memory for yourself that others that will last forever. 6, you can't make everyone happy, and if you try, you'll lose yourself. So stop trying to please and start respecting your values, principles, and autonomy. 7, you can't be perfect, and holding yourself to unrealistic standards creates suffering. Many perfectionists have unrelenting inner critics that are full of so much rage and self-hate that it tears them apart inside. Fight back against that negative voice, amplify your intuition, and start challenging your unrealistic standards. 8, your thoughts are less important than your feelings, and your feelings need acknowledgement. Intellectual thinking through your problems isn't as helpful as expressing the feelings that create your difficulties in the first place. 9, your actions speak louder than your words, so you need to hold yourself accountable. Be responsible and take actions that increase positivity and love. 10, your achievements and successes won't matter on your deathbed. When your time has come to transition from this reality, you won't be thinking about that raise. You'll be thinking about the relationships you've made. So start acting accordingly. 11, your talent means nothing without constant effort and practice. Some of the most talented people in the world never move out from their parents' basement. 12, now is the only time that matters. So stop wasting it by ruminating on the past or planning the future. You can't control the past and you can't predict the future, and trying to do so only removes you from the one thing you can control, the present. 13, nobody cares how difficult your life is, and you are the author of your life's story. Stop looking for people to give you sympathy and start creating the life story you want to read. 14, your words are more important than your thoughts, so start inspiring people. Words have the power to oppress, hurt, and shame, but they also have the power to liberate and inspire. Start using them more wisely. 15, investing in yourself isn't selfish. It's the most worthwhile thing you can do. You have to put on your own gas mask to save the person sitting right next to you. I love that. 16, it's not what happens, it's how you react that matters. Train yourself to respond in a way that leads to better outcomes. 17, you need to improve your relationships to have lasting happiness. Relationships have a greater impact on your well-being and happiness than your income or your occupation. So make sure you give your relationship the attention and work it deserves. 18, pleasure is temporary and fleeting, so stop chasing fireworks and start building a constellation. I love this. Don't settle for an ego boost right now when you can delay gratification and experience deeper fulfillment. Absolutely. Your ambition means nothing without execution. It's time to put in the work. Yes, if you want to change the world, go out there and do it. And finally, time is your most valuable asset. You need to prioritize how you spend it. You have the power and responsibility to decide what you do with the time you have, so choose wisely. Or, as Soren said, time is the fire in which we burn. You know, I've had this sitting on my computer. I wanted to share this. I was going to do this in my 300th show. So, by the way, there is the link to this list. and it is in the live chat. So there you go. Now, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, that didn't work. I was going to do an Oscar Goldman taking off the glasses and go, Steve, because no one could take off their glasses before David Caruso took off his glasses in CSI Miami. Oscar Goldman, Steve Austin's boss and the $6 Million Man. That guy could take off his glasses. I forgot I was wearing my headphones, so you just saw me try and do something cool and fail epically. But you know what? I own that. Cheers to that. So now, let's get back to the imagination connoisseurship that we all know and love. What's up? And I've got some letters to read. I got some chats to read. I got all kinds of things going. By the way, I will, in fact, be wearing my Seahawks jersey tomorrow because it's the first game of the playoffs. They didn't get a bye week. They're playing the Eagles. Could be a tough game. Willow has a very good question, and I'm going to throw this out to the live chat. Willow says, why didn't Obi-Wan finish Anakin off on Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith? Couldn't he sense that Anakin was still alive? Willow, it is not the Jedi way to finish someone off, unless, of course, you put them out of their misery. But it's a good question. It's a compelling question. I would say that, it's probably not very Jedi-like to do that. Pardon me, I'm just gonna wipe my face down a little bit. What do you think? What do you think, people? I just think the Jedi. I don't think it's the Jedi way. I don't know. I guess, is it the Jedi way to allow him to suffer? Or maybe Obi-Wan had to get out of there because Order 66 had been called, and he knew the Emperor's forces were almost there. So that could be it. Shadowzak09 sent in a super chat. Shadowzak says, have you seen The Grudge yet? I have not. I mean, I've seen the original Grudge. I've seen Ju-On, and I saw the American remake, but I have not seen the remake of the original. So what do you think? Did you like it? I don't know. Jay Canada sent a $3.80. You sent a super chat, and I love reading the however it translates. It's so funny. Hey Rob, just looking at Gareth Edwards' IMDb, the guy has nothing lined up. Think his Rogue One experience messed him up? Where is the tip option? Oh, the tip option is in the top of the description for all of the chats. So if you choose to use the tip option or the super chat option, which, by the way, I thank everybody for doing, you can see at the description on the chat, you can click on that, or you can super chat, either way. But thank you very much, and I will read your question. Now Jay, I have to tell you, one of the great frustrations in working in Hollywood is a career. You make a movie that made $1 billion. $1 billion. A Star Wars movie that made over $1 billion, and Gareth Edwards does not have anything lined up yet. It just goes to show you that in this day and age, I've told people a lot that when my own story, people have said, "Oh, Rob, you directed one movie that came out." Well, now it's 21 years ago, and that's all you've directed feature-wise. It's true. When Free Enterprise did the festival circuit, we won awards. I was told how great I was. I got an agent. I was a William Morris client, and I went for a year. I went on countless meetings with people. And I had made Free Enterprise was basically a movie that was shot for $600,000, and it was a majority of that, went to our cast and crew and all of that. But you make a movie and you think, after winning awards, that you have a career. Well, when Free Enterprise opened on June 4th, 1999, it had no advertising budget, and no one went and saw it. So it made no money. So why would anybody hire me? The name of the game in Hollywood is to make money for somebody. Now, the question is, Gareth Edwards, he made $1 billion movie, but the perception in the industry was, after he did Monsters, he did Godzilla. He jumped from doing Monsters, which he did the visual effects for himself, and that movie was made for very, very, very little money. And, he went down and shot it himself and went across the border and did all the work. Then he goes, and because of that movie, he gets Godzilla, which is a giant franchise property. And then, of course, he gets Rogue One, which had to be reshot. His story, he wasn't ready to make a movie like Rogue One, but he got to make a movie like Rogue One because he jumped from a micro-budget sci-fi movie to Godzilla. And I think that's part of the reason that our culture is the way it is nowadays. I mean, it's really hard to keep a career going. You don't have time. You're not given enough time to build it, because once you get into the studio system, because the movies now are so expensive, you're looking at movies that are hundreds of millions of dollars to make, and then they're expected to make $1 billion. But in the case of Rogue One, he probably made the movie he told them that he was going to make, and then they had to reshoot it. I've heard many different reports, different conflicting reports, that they were horrified that he basically made a movie about the horrors of war, which is sort of funny because Star Wars is a franchise about war that's actually fun, where in those movies billions of people are exterminated. I mean, the entire planet Alderaan. Do any movies in history have a larger body count than the Star Wars films? I mean, how many people died in The Force Awakens when Starkiller Base fired its primary weapon in the middle of the core systems? And we're just like, yeah, did anyone mourn those people? I mean, at least in Star Wars, you had Ben Kenobi going, ugh. At least Ben Kenobi mourned the victims of Alderaan. It's just, yeah. So when somebody goes and makes a movie about the horrors of war, you're like, you can't make a Star Wars movie about the horrors of war. Luckily, they were able to make a movie where everybody died at the end, which I thought was pretty cool. But it's a bummer. It is a bummer that we that you that can happen. You can go into director jail by no fault of your own, really, which is kind of a bummer. I don't know. Daznuke sent in a super chat. I met Terry at a London screening for Imaginarium. The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. He was so kind and generous with his time, for which I'm grateful. This type of journalism is awful. Well, the thing is, she did report what he said, but it's how it's couched. I mean, I think the thing that I really object to is that, if somebody's had a career and somebody has worked hard all their lives and they've brought you work that you enjoy, they're saying something about themselves, I think, in that. And then, look, there have been people that have been revealed to be monsters. I'll tell you something. When I was a client at William Morris, I was developing a project with Bill Cosby. I would go to Bill Cosby's house once a week and sit down with him for hours, and he would regale me with stories. And he was incredibly charismatic, very nice to me, very funny. He was a great raconteur. He was a great writer. I had admired him. I grew up with Fat Albert, and then, of course, as Jell-O Pudding, and then as Cliff Huxtable. I had no idea that he had a sexual pathology of a serial predator, and he had been drugging and raping women for decades. I had no idea. Now, I'll tell you this. I can never forgive Bill Cosby. Having been with him and having hung out with him, there was no indication he was that kind of a man. No indication. But I think people's sexuality is a very compartmentalized part of their lives. Some people want to make it more. They're more flamboyant about their sexuality, both straight people, gay people, bisexual people, transgendered, whoever. Sexuality is a very complex thing because it's all rooted in human behavior, and human behavior is very complex. But I have to say that I really felt when the allegations came out about Bill Cosby that I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed because his behavior, his compulsion, while maybe he couldn't fight it, was a premeditated pathology. He knew what he was doing, and he was hiding behind. He was the worst kind of evil to me when these allegations came out. The worst kind of evil, because he was building a persona that allowed him to get closer, like any kind of predator. He used the persona his public persona. He created his public persona to feed his dark pathology. And there was no indication of that when I worked with him. Absolutely none. And it was quite terrifying, to be honest. And I don't think Terry Gilliam's comments, not all #MeToo men are created equal. And I think that that's something, there is nuance and subtlety in people. And I think they deserve respect and understanding until they don't. And in the case of Terry Gilliam, not so good. Alexander Wilson said, Terry Gilliam said that BS about how the imagery of Black Panther was bad for kids and Coogler didn't do his job. Why does he need my respect? Well, for that, I don't think he does, Alexander. I thought those comments were idiotic. I thought they were really stupid. And on one hand, I mean, look, what I would say is, I wonder when I look at someone like Terry Gilliam, I'm like, why did you say something like that, Terry? Like, why? That was a stupid thing to say. And if I was sitting with him, I'd say, you're an idiot for saying something like that. Because although I think that from his perspective, look, there's a lot of people that, just like the comic book medium itself, which has been, especially in this country, dismissed for decades, visual storytelling, graphic storytelling has been vibrant for a much longer time in Europe and Asian countries. For whatever reason, comic art was infantilized in this country from the get-go. And I think that was unfortunate because there's many great political cartoons. People take those seriously. But for whatever reason, and I think that, and Terry Gilliam, who's worked in the graphic arts, I mean, he should know better. The guy made Time Bandits. But on the other hand, I mean, people say stupid shit all the time. And they do stupid things. But I do think that was particularly dumb. And I wonder if he even saw Black Panther, to be honest. I looked no further than that video. You can find it about the guys. It was last winter or the winter before Black Panther came out. It was a viral video where one guy was filming. It was like three black dudes, and one guy was filming, and the other two were talking about if we could have grown up seeing representation like this. He's like, white people get representation like this all the time, and it was so great because on one hand, they were so clearly excited that they were getting this Black Panther movie, but on the other hand, they were making a very poignant and very hard-hitting statement, and I thought very clear. What's it like when you grow up in a world where every single movie poster, every action hero, every superhero is a bunch of white dudes? And then you get a movie poster which is full of some of the greatest black actors working today. Sure, there's the Tolkien white dudes, Bilbo Baggins and Gollum. But, I mean, you have a poster that shows Wakanda and all of these characters and all of their glory. Can you imagine what it's like if you're a 7 or 8 year old kid now and you're black? And you don't know what it was like to live in a world where there was no Black Panther and you can have a Black Panther movie poster on your wall. I mean, when I was a kid, when I bought Star Wars posters, that's when I first started buying original movie posters. I was 10. My room was filled with movie posters. And nowadays, you can buy, if you're, again, a young black boy or girl, to be able to have something like that and be able to put it on your wall. That didn't exist 5 years ago. What does that mean to that kid? It means the world. And Terry Gilliam was a stupid guy for saying that. But I still think that, yes, those were ignorant, stupid comments, but it doesn't take away from the battles he fought and the work that he's done over the decades. I don't think one stupid comment. Look, if he made a succession of stupid comments and he continued to say stuff like this, you can lose respect for somebody, absolutely. Because I think, to prove what kind of a person you are, it's a lifelong thing. You can't suddenly then reveal your true colors and expect everybody to say, well, he was great up until this point. So, but yes, Alexander, I agree with you. That was a really dumb thing to say. And I don't know why he said it. Claude Hibbert says, Hail Watu, Gilliam, Wakanda is real, great topic. As a Jamaican American, a fan of Python, Gilliam is Gilliam misguided? Yes, but not wrong. Our concepts of ethnicity and race and status are outdated. Claude, very interesting comment of you to say. I agree with you, too. I agree with you 100%. I think that they are. And I think, look, we are evolving rapidly, socially, economically. Our world is undergoing. I mean, if you don't have to look any further than Australia to see where we're going, and hopefully we'll come to our senses and do a little better. But I think you're right. I mean, it's very interesting to meet people. I mean, one of the things I take a lot of lifts, and I've met a lot of different people and driving lifts, and I don't drive Lyft, but I mean taking lifts or Ubers, and I love the conversations I have with my Lyft drivers, because usually they're people just like me. Everybody's doing they're doing Lyft for a side hustle. I'm doing this, these shows. Everyone's working on their art, and in this day and age, I mean, I have to tell you, even working on low budget independent movies, you can't make enough money to live. You have to be multitasking all the time. And I think that, our world is in a very weird place right now, and all of the old status quos are being swept away. But I'd like to think, like with everything, our younger people are far more tolerant of people different than themselves. I mean, I've seen a lot of evidence. My girlfriend's oldest daughter has friends of all different ethnicities, and she doesn't even... There's not even an issue. It doesn't even come up. It's like they're just who they are, and I find that really interesting. I think that's the thing that she says, and she's as white as they come. Zoe Trope, she's 19 years old, and she's constantly talking about when she meets people about how she hates any kind of prejudice in any way, shape, or form, because she has so many diverse. Her group of friends is very diverse, and it's just heartwarming to sort of hear that, because I know from traveling around the world that it really depends where you're standing. When I was in South Korea last year, there was nobody screaming about white male privilege. I mean, Asian civilizations have been very patriarchal. But, I mean, I'm sure Willow Yang can probably tell you what goes on between her mom and her dad. But I bet Willow doesn't want to cross her mother. I mean, it's very different. It depends where you are on the planet. The problem is, so many of Americans don't travel that much, so we haven't had the experience of going different places and seeing different people. I mean, even to Jamaica. And it's too bad. But I think you're absolutely right. By the way, thank you for supporting the channel. I appreciate it. Anthony Gonzalez says, what would Singer's X-Men look like had he made it? I don't quite understand that. I mean, as somebody who made the documentaries for the X-Men DVD, I can tell you he did make it. Now, at the time, he had a very hard time making it, but he did make X-Men. And he made X-Men 2, and he made X-Men Days of Future Past, and he made X-Men Apocalypse. And by the way, I would suggest everybody should watch my documentaries I produced with Dave Parker on the X-Men and X2 Blu-rays, because you can see them. They're pretty good. So I don't know, Alexander or Anthony, what you were getting at, but Journey's End. Good to see you, Journey's End. Hey, Rob, love the show as always. I was just curious if you would ever consult on a screenplay outline, paid. I really respect your thoughts on storytelling, and I've always wanted to get your input. Yes, I've done that. I've done screenplay consulting. I've done reading, as you know. I've read I was paid as a professional to read literally thousands of scripts. Here's my problem, though. Here's my problem. I've said this before. 90% of all screenplays are terrible. And it's the kind of thing where I always hesitate to read people's writing now. I want to, first of all, I want to encourage everybody to write. I do, because I think everybody who wants to be a writer should be writing. But I'm always reluctant to tell people what I think of their writing. And look, this is not to say I'm not the world's greatest writer myself. Like if I sat down and wrote, I've written 3 screenplays in my life. One of them got made. I made it. So I'm at 33%. I'm batting 33%. One of my actually, I think all three of my screenplays were pretty good. Two of them I wrote with a partner. One I wrote by myself, but it was an adaptation of a book. And I think all three of them are pretty good. But even if I'm paid, it's really difficult. I mean, I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. But people don't. If you really want to hear criticism, and maybe you've written something that's awesome, it doesn't need that much criticism, but man, I have to tell you, it's rough. It is rough. Although when people are being paid, you're being paid for criticism. If you paid me to do it, I would not be like, hey man, this is great. Just so you know, I'm not going to sit there and sing your praises. If you're paying me to critique your work, what you're going to get is a critique, not me. I will be encouraging because I think it's great that you wrote something in the first place. But I'd be happy to consult with you with the understanding that you are paying me to critique you, not to tell you that your work is great. Now, if it is good, I'll tell you. But look, even the stuff that I do, whether it's film editing, we are constantly trying to improve it. But yes, I would absolutely do that. Ashley Short says, hi, Rob. My first cinema experience of 2020 is under my hat. I went to see Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman. I loved it. Oh, my God. I want to see The Gentleman so bad. I saw a reviewer, what is it, the morning breakfast show or something. Hugh Grant was on there with Matthew McConaughey. Man, and the host was, I saw a YouTube clip of this. I don't know the host's name, but man, did it make me want to see this. I can't wait. I cannot wait to see this movie. You loved it. Maybe Charlie Hunnam's best performance to date, and I'm a huge fan of his. Hugh Grant is unrecognizable. Such a great time. Laugh out loud funny. Well, Ashley, I cannot wait to see this movie. It looks so good to me. Movie Finobi is here. Happy weekend. Celebrating Mom's birthday a week early Sunday. Seeing The Rise of Skywalker and a Scrabble birthday cake. See you in Brooklyn. Let us know if there's a meetup. Yes, Movie Finobi has asked me about this. I don't know what my travel plans are in New York yet. Obviously, the Schmodown event is on Saturday the 25th. I might come in a few days. I have such a busy week. I've got to go to Portland on a shoot after that weekend. As many people know, I did a medical lecture series called Crisis Medicine Tactical Casualty Care that I'm very, very proud of. You can go to the Crisis. As a matter of fact, I will put in the, if you want to look, I recommend everybody take this course. It's about pre-hospital care and active violent events, whether it's stabbing events or shooting events or anything like that. And I directed, produced, was the director of photography and the editor on this medical lecture series. And I have to go shoot more, 2 more classes for it. So I'm going to do that. I just put the link in the live chat. Check that out. So yeah, I will tell everybody if there's a meetup. I'd love to have a Post-Geek Singularity, an Imagination Connoisseur meetup in New York. Maybe before, like, if it's in Brooklyn, I just assume that the whole day we're going to be dealing with that. And I've got a really good friend in New York, so maybe he can suggest a place. He has a apartment in Park Slope, so maybe somewhere in that neighborhood. I think it'd be a lot of fun to meet up. Mukbang is here. Mukbang Reviews said, Dorothy was a waitress on the promenade. She worked the night shift, dishwater blonde, tall and fine. She got a lot of tips. That's, of course, the Ballad of Dorothy Parker off Sign of the Times. Thank you, Mukbang. I very much appreciate any chance to sing Prince lyrics. I love that you love Prince as much as I do. I should have got my... when you write in and send me Prince lyrics, I don't know if you can see it, but I feel like since it is up there in the Robservatory, that is my actual Prince tambourine. My tambourine that more Prince lyrics for you, ladies and gentlemen. Around the world in a day. Yes, love sexy. But yes, I feel like whenever you do that, I feel like I should. I'll find my own cameras. I feel like I should get the tambourine down and start playing. That's which I appreciate. I really appreciate that you send in those Prince lyrics, because it makes me feel good. I love the fact that you and I are both into his Purple Badness. And so, by the way, is Greg Smith, our moderator. Greg Smith is a huge Prince fan. Anthony Gonzalez says, somehow my super chat went foobar. I meant his X-Men 3. Oh, well, I'll tell you why he didn't make X-Men 3. He was going to. And Brian had a really cool idea about the Hellfire Club. Some of those ideas were actually translated into X-Men First Class. But he was going to, and then he took the opportunity to make Superman Returns at Warner Brothers. They offered that to him, and it was before X-Men 3 was actually greenlit. So, and by the way, Brian was the executive producer of House. He cast Hugh Laurie, and he directed the pilot, and his company was he was executive producer of House, which, by the way, he made a lot of money on. A lot of money. More money than I will ever see in my lifetime, in 10 lifetimes, just off that one show. But they kicked him off the lot. They kicked Bad Hat Harry off the lot, basically, when he went to do that. So Brett Ratner took over. By the way, I was in Seattle with Brian in his hotel room. No. We're just hanging out because I'm from Seattle, and he got a call from Brett Ratner, and he put on speakerphone, and Brett Ratner was exasperated when he was making Last Stand. And he was like, I don't know how you made these movies so good. He was completely exasperated. He didn't know it was good. I mean, he was upset, and it was interesting. It was interesting to hear one director talk to another director, and I felt like I was like a fly on the wall and privileged for something. Alexander Wilson says the median family wealth for white people is $171,000 compared with just $17,600 for black people. That's where white privilege comes from, and racist job hiring practices. Well, the median family wealth. Yes, look, but the problem I don't think is race. The problem is economic status and opportunity and things like that. I mean, obviously, look, black America has never been equal in this country ever. No matter what's happened, black America, how many black Americans are incarcerated? Watch Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th. No, there's incredible inequality here. Absolutely, there's incredible inequality. There's economic inequality, there's educational inequality. There's all kinds of inequality. But I don't necessarily think that I would call that white privilege so much as I would call it inequality. You know, we have to call these things what they are. I think look at Flint, Michigan. Why? As soon as they found out that there was water, the water wasn't good in Flint, Michigan, why didn't we go in there and fix it? Why didn't we carve out some of our military budget and go in and redo the whole fucking water system in that town? Why? Because the people that were affected were predominantly black. And that's bullshit. I mean, they're Americans, and this is my problem. I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think that we really need to start thinking. We have to get rid of these ethnic and racial divides and start thinking about ourselves as all part of the human race, and we have to start thinking about all Americans. And it's bad, man. And I'm with you. It makes me. It really makes me angry. It really makes me angry because if you were to travel the world, when I was in South Korea, I tell people I knew what it was like to walk into a store and be looked at sort of sideways because the only real white people in Korea are military. I mean, there's others, but predominantly so. And anywhere I went in South Korea, I was either ignored or people had eyes on me because I was a tall white dude. It was very disconcerting. And I was like, oh, this is what it's like to be a minority in America and go in to buy a tube of toothpaste at 7-Eleven, at 2 a.m. after you've met a nice lady, you're on your way home or whatever, and you realize I'm out of toothpaste. You want to go into a 7-Eleven. The experience that I would have as a white dude or say you would have walking into that same 7-Eleven at 2 a.m. would be very different. And this is the problem. This is what we have to get over. And black America's never been equal. Never. And that's what's really problematic. But yes, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that the white median income is higher, and we have to fix that. We do. I mean, what do we have? We're looking at the black population of the United States is also 15%, 15 or 16%. We need to see that increase. The Latino population, white people are going to become the minority overall in this country, and I think, you know, we're living again through a transitional period of time. I think it is going to get better. People are more aware of these problems, but it's something that has started, and it's moving forward in fits and starts. But it is getting better. But I agree with you. Although I don't know where my median family income at $171,000 is. It's certainly not the case in this household, let me tell you. Journey's End sent a super chat in. Regarding Gareth Edwards, do you think there's a way for him to get out of director's jail if he's currently in it? How does he get back on track? Well, you know, I think that the person who has proven how you get out of director's jail, I think the greatest proof of all is M. Night Shyamalan. You know, I mean, Shyamalan was in director's jail. He basically came on strong after his indie movie by making Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs. And then he kind of got his head full of steam. He became an egomaniac. And then he went and pissed everybody off, whether making The Village or making The Woman in the Water or The Lady in the Water or The Happening. I mean, my God. When I read The Happening script, I was like, this is really intriguing. And then I saw the movie. I'm like, oh, my God. I'm like, dude, how did you make these directorial choices? You know, I even kind of liked After Earth. It was in After Earth, the movie with Will Smith and his son, Jaden. But he was in director jail. What did he do? You know, it was crazy. He worked his way up, and then he's making huge studio movies, and then he crashed and burned, but he did something really smart. And how you get out of director's jail is you come up with a good project, and he was able to help finance these himself. But he made The Visit for Blumhouse. He made The Visit $5 million or less, and then that was a hit, and then he made Split, and then he made Glass. Between the money that Split and Glass make, I think Split was also made for like 8, and then Glass was made for 20, and they all made bank, comparatively speaking, worldwide, and he worked his way up. So what he has to do, I think what Gareth Edwards has to do, look what Rian Johnson did. Rian Johnson makes The Last Jedi, $1 billion movie, despite all the controversy. He goes back and he makes Knives Out, a movie that's basically set in a house, where he's got an incredible cast. They probably cut their fees. They were able to make that movie on a budget, and then he comes back. So Gareth Edwards has to go back. He has to go backwards, start over, go back to his indie roots, make a movie, start again. And then hopefully he'll be back. I mean, people can bet on him because he did make a movie. What he has to do is he has to work his way back, and he has to, Mr. Gilroy, who apparently helped him out on both Godzilla and Rogue One, he has to move out of that, and he has to make another visionary movie like Monsters was. Mukbang says, thanks for getting me into Sideshow 6th scale. I'm up to 2 now. Laugh out loud. Black Panther and Father. I will get more. I blame you. And I thank you, sir. I love them and can't wait to see yours. Bruh, let me just say, if you got Black Panther and his father, you got to get Shuri. Shuri's a great figure. I mean, she's smaller, but you got to get Shuri. She's awesome. That's a really, really good figure. And then, of course, you got to bust on the Throne of Wakanda, which is just the Throne of Wakanda. It's like $100, but it's the Throne of Wakanda. You got to get that. That way you can do a whole display. And, of course, Killmonger has come out. And I wasn't going to get Killmonger because it didn't have a head sculpt of Michael B. Jordan. I was like, I gotta have my boy Michael B. Jordan, and gotta have his face, because I have my Black Panther figure. I took his helmet off because I like Chad Boseman, so I have him holding his Black Panther helmet, because you got to do that. And I have Shuri is actually sitting in the Throne of Wakanda, because I think that's cool. Evan Newman says, my Prince song of the day every day are P Control and Sexy MF. They're great late night bar songs, especially when played back to back. I'll tell you about P Control. So I've told the story before, but I'm going to tell it again. So when I was writing for Sci-Fi Universe magazine in the mid to late 90s, in 96, the magazine was torn. Were we going to feature The Fifth Element on our cover, or were we going to feature Independence Day? Well, Luc Besson was working on Fifth Element here, and he had a house that he'd got in Malibu. I don't know if he bought it or he was renting it. And that's where he was editing. That's where his edit bay was for Fifth Element. So Mark Altman and I journeyed up the coast. We go to Malibu, and we go into his house. And he takes us in this room, and he says, okay, in his very sick French accent. He was that a good French accent? It probably was not very good. But he sits us down, and he says, okay, I want to show you guys a behind-the-scenes video where he was showing us the film being made. This is pre-DVD, so it's a behind-the-scenes video. He puts it on, and it is cut to P Control. For those of you who don't know, Pussy Control, the Prince song P Control, off the Gold Experience. And there's other versions of it have appeared other places, but I'm sitting there, I'm in this room, and it's a great sound system, and it's playing at ear-splitting volume, and we're watching, it's all B-roll, it's all behind the scenes, them making the movie, but cut to Prince's P Control, and I'm like, oh my God, Luc Besson's now my favorite person in the world. Of course, he's also being accused of horrible things, but I really liked him. I really like Luc Besson. I've been a fan of his movies, and meeting him in person, he was hilarious. And Sexy MF is one of my favorite Prince songs. In a word or two, it's you I want to do. No, not your body, your mind, you fool. Ooh, doot, doot, doot. You sexy moon. So have you ever seen a video for that song? You, get in the car. It's such a great, if you haven't seen that, 3 Chains of Gold, is it 3 Chains of Gold? I have a laser disc of those videos. So I think it's called 3 Chains of Gold. I'm sure they released it on DVD. I never got the DVD. But those are 2 of Prince's greatest songs, P Control and Sexy MF. You and I definitely park our shuttlecraft in the same shuttle bay. Alexander Wilson says, and a lot of black soldiers, including my grandfather, helped freed the Jewish from concentration camps in World War II, and the people that they helped freed had more freedom and access when they came to the U.S. than the black soldiers. That is absolutely true. And there was, I don't know if you watched Watchmen, Alexander, but that was true of World War I as well. And there's that great scene in World War I where we see one of the characters' ancestors getting that flyer. The Nazis were dropping flyers on our black soldiers in World War I from planes saying, you don't, why fight for America? You don't have any rights there. And of course, you read about what happened to the Tuskegee Airmen, and look, America has not treated our black brothers and sisters very well. We never have, and we there one day that will change, but until that time, unfortunately, there's never been any kind of equality, and it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. Although politically, modern day blacks and Jews, being a Jew, have a lot more in common than a lot of other people. So that's always been good. But yes, if you haven't watched Watchmen, I'd be very curious to read your take on the show. I haven't really gotten into all of it. I talked a little bit about it the other day, but it's really interesting. Mukbang Review says, someone's trying to do a Prince song of the day. That's my job. Today it's Get Off, 23 positions in a 2-night stand. And yes, I've been on stage with him during this track. You have? I know, it's typo, 1-night stand. I corrected you. Yes, Get Off is one of the great Prince songs of all time. Another great tune. Nobody ever did that. It's funny. My grandfather, who was of German ancestry, by the way, Alexander, used to talk about the black soldiers that came upon the concentration camps. He talked about that a lot, actually. So my grandfather was a hell of a guy. So you know what I haven't delved into yet? I haven't delved into letters. Let's see I know I've got letters. I got some really interesting letters, actually, and I'm going to read them because I haven't been reading them. So let me get to them. Let me get to the rundown. It is called the rundown. Mike Bodden calls it the rundown, so I'll call it the rundown. Today's rundown, let's see what I've got. This is a funny letter. I like this letter. Okay, Bunyan Snipe. Bunyan Snipe, longtime viewer. I recognize Bunyan Snipe's name. Bunyan Snipe describes himself, by the way, as a longtime geek, short-time contributor. Bunyan's story. Here's the thing. I don't know how to pitch ideas. I get an idea in my head that I think is cool, and I go with it. About 10 years ago, I played a really cool G.I. Joe mod for Battlefield 1942. Fast forward another 7 or 8 years, and it hit me. My mind, as you can tell, is like a steel trap. Why is there not a video game that combines all of Hasbro's franchises into one cool shared video game universe? And I started thinking about how it would work. Transformers and G.I. Joe have had plenty of crossovers in comics in the past. How cool would a video game be? Then I thought of something else. How cool would it be to play an action figure charging into battle on your trusty My Little Pony, avoiding hordes of little Decepticons to attack the Cobra Terrordrome? Really fucking cool. Backyard battleground. He even did an image, and I'm going to send it to you, and it links to the page on the Burnettwork website. Check it out. That is a very funny image. I like the Cobra insignia on the My Little Pony. I think that is quite amusing. I think it's very funny. Oh, well, here it comes. Dean Mikitich. She's been writing a lot of letters. Dean Mikitich wrote a bio. I'm a lifelong fan of all things science fiction, especially Star Trek. I'm currently living in the UK, but I also lived in Germany and Gibraltar. My father was in the Royal Air Force. I do digital art as a hobby, whether that be painting in Photoshop or creating 3D models in the free-to-use software Blender. Hi, Rob, Mike, and the Imagination Connoisseur community. After I submitted a couple of renders of my recently built TOS Enterprises, I was looking for another project to do, and listening to R&B talk about one of his favorite TOS episodes being the Immunity Syndrome, I decided to sit down and watch it, as it had been some time since I last saw it, and that's when inspiration hit me. I had to build the Type 6 shuttle to go with my Enterprise. Although not true copy of the shuttle that was used in the show, I changed a few things to make it a little more believable while retaining the original look and keeping the same dimensions. I gave it doors on both sides, side windows for the pilot and co-pilot to look out of, a wider rear end for the fuel and oxygen tanks to be stored, and an airlock escape hatch on top. Once I'd finished building the shuttle, I had to make some pictures with her. Of course, because of Rob's love of the Immunity Syndrome, got me to see it again and inspire me, I had to do a couple of pictures with the shuttle, Enterprise, and the Space Amoeba. I have submitted them here as a thank you. Also, because of Rob's love for Star Trek The Motion Picture, the director's cut, I rewatched it this weekend. The scene where we see the Enterprise with a new look and Scotty showing it to Kirk inspired me again. I'm now currently building the refit of the Enterprise, but also of her sister ships, the Enterprise B, C, D, and E. According to the Countdown comic preceding the Picard show, there's also an Enterprise F that was part of Star Trek Online that's now, I guess, going to be canonical. This is going to be a big project, and in the words of Kirk to Picard, sounds like, wow, it sounds like fun. These are pretty cool. This is pretty interesting stuff, and I'm dropping it in the live chat. So take a gander at that. So thanks, Dean. I didn't know you were so talented, sir. That's good to hear. And wow, there's this is really interesting. More advertising, but it's great. This from Swack Props. I've always loved making movie props. When I was a kid, I made lightsabers out of cardboard tubes and even Freddy's glove with plastic knives. In 2006, I decided to try making something I've always wanted as an Indiana Jones fan, the Grail Diary. It was a really daunting endeavor, but when it was completed, I felt great satisfaction. I shared pictures of my diary on several prop forums and gained a lot of praise, even some asking if I could make one for them. That's when I started offering my work to others on a commission basis, and I slowly increased my portfolio to include other replicas like the 9 Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows, which you made for me, along with Rorschach's Journal, Sarah's Red Book from Labyrinth, Thorin's Map from The Hobbit, Silence Doggood's Letter from National Treasure, and most recently, the Winter Soldier Code Book from Captain America Civil War. Nowadays, I offer my replicas on my Etsy store where I get orders from collectors the world over, and it's been gratifying for me to know that my replicas have been to many countries, even where I haven't been. First of all, as everyone knows, Swag Props has sent me 2 of those, and they're amazing. I mean, if you want to get an interesting gift for your imagination connoisseur in your life, his Swag Props' work is at the highest caliber. He should be working in Hollywood making books. It's unbelievable how good his work is. Like when you get it, I mean, I have they're right over there. I can't reach them. But when you get those things, it's amazing. His work is great. And again, I'll put in the live chat, this is the link to the website. Check out what Swag Props does, Cal can do. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, his work. It's really, really, really incredible. Now, here it comes, ladies and gentlemen, the subject that will never end forever. This is from Keith O'Neill. Hey, Rob, how are you? I'm sure you're probably sick to death about the release the Abrams cut talk about the rise of Skywalker, but something about it doesn't add up. I'm not doubting there is some footage left on the cutting room floor. As you said on John Campia's show, every movie has unused footage. What I'm doubting is the motive. Why would Disney sabotage their own movie just to spite J.J. Abrams for going to Warner Brothers and help them out with their DC movies, as the leak claimed? Why would they knowingly put out an inferior product just to make J.J. Abrams damage goods? I don't think Disney views the DC films as a threat to Marvel Studios, and this is coming from a Man of Steel and Batman v Superman fan. Seriously, something doesn't add up. Well, Keith, I'll tell you. Personally, my personal belief about all this, I don't believe that Disney would recut a movie based on spite. That's just not, people don't do that. Smart people don't do that. And the people at Disney are smart. I do believe that the movie was cut down, that people thought it was too long. I think The Rise of Skywalker, because, and it's not just, see, here's the thing. In the hallowed halls of Disney, all of the fan vitriol over Star Wars, even when it was terrible and people were screaming bloody murder, you know what they were doing? They were talking about The Last Jedi. They wouldn't shut up about it. For 2 years, YouTube, to this day, every single day there's mention. I don't think there's been a movie that's come out in the last 25 years that has had more ink spilled about it than The Last Jedi. You know what that means for Disney? It's great. It's all publicity. How many people would want... I mean, people would pay tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars in marketing fees to get people to talk about their movie even after it came out. Because all it does is it's publicity for your next film. However, they knew that there was this vitriol. So Disney also knew that they're wrapping up their 9-film Skywalker saga. And they wanted to go out on a big note. I mean, what people don't understand is, yes, Solo underperformed. Solo was never going to perform. It could have been the best movie in the world, and it didn't star Harrison Ford as Han Solo, and your audience was never, ever, ever going to embrace it because look, even Creed had Sylvester Stallone in it. It's a Rocky movie. It's a Rocky sequel with Rocky in it. You know, there was no way, if they had a Solo movie where old Harrison Ford was telling the story, like, I don't know, to Carrie Fisher or something, and you had those wraparounds, it would have made a shit ton of money. Shit ton of money. But you can't convince people that Alden Ehrenreich is Han Solo. And that was the mistake. People, as good as that movie was, I like Solo. Did it try and cram like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? Let's explain who Indiana Jones is by showing what happened to him in one afternoon. Yeah, it was a little weird. But nobody was ever going to... Solo was never going to make money. It didn't matter what it was about. It didn't matter how good it was. Nobody's going to go watch a Solo movie. They're just not. They should have made an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie starring Ewan McGregor, because Ewan McGregor is Obi-Wan Kenobi. So is obviously Alec Guinness. But as a young Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ewan McGregor was perfect. People immediately, of all the things that are in the prequel trilogy that we can all agree on, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ewan McGregor was great. He was great as Obi-Wan. So people would have embraced an Obi-Wan movie. And how they don't know this is beyond me. I don't understand. I don't understand how anybody, the powers that be, do not understand that, yes, let's do that first. Because then you've got Rogue One, you follow it up with Kenobi. You're done. You're in. Then maybe you could have done a solo movie. But anyway, so I don't think it was Disney. They're not trying to sabotage anything. They want the movie to be as good as it can be. That's what they're interested in doing. They absolutely are. They want it to be great. They don't want it to fail, because who wants anything to fail? They don't. And I do think that there was probably battle royales fought in those edit bays. And I'm sure Disney wanted something, because look, again, Disney has these corporate interests at hand, and Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy, Alan Horn, whatever, they're going to weigh in on a movie like this. There's no doubt about it. There's no way around that. They were going to weigh in on this. And they probably wanted the movie shorter. I mean, I think Star Wars fans, they should have made the movie 3 hours and slowed it down. I think whatever they could have added into the story, if it is true that look, it was very interesting to me that they credited all the people that played Force Ghosts, or that had the voices of the Jedi, are in the end of that movie. And because they're credited on screen, I think they were credited on screen because they were physically shot as people. That's why they have those credits. Because you don't have to, I've never seen that before, where they've credited voices like that. I think they had to credit them because SAG rules say that, hey, they put those people in front of the camera. They work for a day. So they were just credited, because we don't see them, the credits voice the Jedi. So I think a lot of these leaks, I'm sure again, let's get rid of those things. Why hark back to something that we're never going to touch again? So I believe that there was battle royales being fought over the cut of Rise of Skywalker. And I bet those Jedis all filmed scenes. But they probably filmed or signed NDAs, so they can't say. But I'll bet they did, because that's how they're credited in the film. Remember, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Every one of those people negotiated that credit. It's how your credits appear in a movie are part of your contract. So what would be really interesting is to see in SAG, go to SAG and get the reports on Rise of Skywalker and see if anyone worked a day, shot for a day. See if you know anybody that works at SAG. It'd be interesting to see. But I think they should release a director's cut. Why not? I think it'd make a lot of money. But they probably won't. I don't know. We shall see. This one comes from Dallas Lemons. Again, hello again, Viceroy. Yes, I will from here on out refer to you as Viceroy. Thank you for the insight into how the extended lore is viewed from the CXO level at entertainment corporations in my previous letter. I wanted to share what my love of another great franchise we both cherish means to me. Star Trek. I grew up privileged in San Diego, thanks to hard-working parents. My dad worked long hours, and my mom would have dinner ready. When my dad finally came home, we'd watch Star Trek The Next Generation. I can't tell you the flood of incredible emotions that the opening musical theme of TNG brings to me. I'm 31, so likely we were watching a lot of reruns. But in the last year, I've watched TNG from start to finish, and I love it even more as an adult than I did as a child. Star Trek The Next Generation never felt overly preachy and heavy-handed in relation to the allegorical issues it was trying to tackle. It assumed the viewer was smart enough to infer the message while enjoying the sci-fi setting of the show. Yes, sir. Picard is my captain, and TNG is my Star Trek. Though in San Diego, I visited an exhibit of Star Trek TOS and saw set pieces from City on the Edge of Forever. Coolest name of anything, by the way. Isn't that true? City on the Edge of Forever is one of the great titles of all time. The original series never struck a connective chord with me, though. In retrospect, I understand your criticism of the '09 Star Trek film, and I agree with you. In bringing Picard in binging the Picard episodes of your show, you've expressed great hopes along with great fears. I share both your hopes and fears. I don't want to tread old ground on a topic you've covered extensively, so I ask the following question. If you, Viceroy, were put in charge of a Picard series, what would it look like? What does Picard as a character mean to you? What has the 17-year gap done to our famed and nuanced captain? Best, Dallas. P.S. Do you love Val Kilmer and Real Genius as much as I do? Okay, first of all, as far as Real Genius is concerned, I think of the immortal words of Socrates, who said, I drank what? I love Real Genius, and Val Kilmer in Real Genius is one of those characters I constantly identify with. I love Val Kilmer in Real Genius. When I was in college, I wanted to be Val Kilmer in Real Genius. I just wasn't as smart. And I wanted to find Deborah Foreman to be my girlfriend. Yes, I love Val Kilmer, and I love Real Genius. What a great movie. You unbelievable bastard. It's so good. I love Real Genius. So, Picard. Well, first of all, okay, there's a Dan Simmons book, and I am looking for it on my shelf, called Phases of Gravity, and I'm looking at it right now. Phases of Gravity is a book about an astronaut. It's a fictional astronaut, but a man who landed on the moon. And it's about his life now, years later. And the fact is that the best thing he ever did was behind him. He landed on the moon. And how is it that you find meaning in your life later on when everything that you've done that is of note is behind you? And I find it interesting that we live in a world today where we see Clint Eastwood directing movies at 90. Well, he's going to be 90 in May. But it's unbelievable to me. Ridley Scott, Martin Scorsese, all these people that I admire are working into their 80s. They show no sign of stopping, and they're still working at the top of their game. So if you're Jean-Luc Picard and your days in Starfleet are over, what are you going to do? Like what? So if I was in charge of Picard, I would be asking myself, we need to come up with a story that gives Picard a reason for coming back and doing something again. Why would he, whether it's Starfleet or adventuring or what are we going to do? Now, to me, the obvious thing, they went the obvious route and they said, okay, we're going to bring back the Borg. Because the Borg obviously played such a large... The shadow of the Borg looms large over both Star Trek The Next Generation and in Star Trek Voyager. So, and they brought the Borg back. We saw a little snippet of the Borg in Enterprise. But the Borg has loomed large over this for a long time for Star Trek. So I guess, the idea of... They pitched it... Brian Fuller had originally pitched a story about, obviously, Data and Picard and the Borg. But and the Borg refugees. I think what they're doing, I mean, canonically, it's interesting. It feels like, at least what they've shown us, that it feels like a Star Trek novel more than anything else. I could see it. But look, I would want to basically, the Picard's first love, as we learned, was archaeology, exploration and archaeology. And if I had made a Picard show, I think the very thing that I would delve into is something to do with an incredible archaeological find that threatens the galaxy in somehow, whether the technology, the knowledge, whatever it is, threatens the galaxy. And the overarching theme of whatever I would make is, how does the past affect the present and the future? And Picard would be the embodiment of that idea. Now, the Borg, it seems to me like they've turned this into, okay, we're going to have the Romulans, we're going to have the Borg. Again, they've gone we're going to see a lot of action adventure. And I think there's going to be a lot of whiz bang and all that. We'll get a little fan service for good measure, but it looks to me like they're telling a pretty standard story dressed up in Star Trek lore. That's what I fear. I would have liked to have seen a much more contemplative, and again, we haven't seen the show, and I do not want to, I've talked about it. I'm excited for Picard. I really want it to be great. I hope that it's as great as the shows we've been getting. I hope it's as great as The Boys. I hope it's the great as The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I've been watching Lost in Space. I've really liked that, although the last 2 episodes have been filler. I'm on episode 8 now. But the whole metal being eaten away, I'm like, come on, man, really? We're going to do this old trope again? But, okay. But The Expanse... I watched The Expanse. I didn't so much like Bobby's story in season 4, but Christian Avasarala is one of my favorite characters on TV. And then what was happening on the planet with the crew of the Rocinante, all that was all very interesting. And to me, I mean, it's almost like The Expanse, especially now, has gone way more into Star Trek territory than it ever was. And I find it absolutely fascinating. And I just think, unfortunately, they're going to go the action-adventure route, but they could have done a really interesting story about Picard as a statesman and then wrap it up with a galactic enigma or something along those lines. Something where there are really, really interesting philosophical issues that they could have looked at from multiple levels. And hey, who knows? Maybe we're going to get that. I don't think so, because... They've since 2009, they've tried to turn Star Trek into something it's not. They've tried to turn it into pulp, action-adventure, whiz-bang sci-fi. Bargain basement, in my mind, sci-fi. It's not smart. It's redolent of other things, and I hate it. But, Picard, maybe cooler heads will have prevailed. I don't know, but I can hope. One can hope springs eternal. At least it still does. Mukbang reviews. Did you read all of Octavia Butler's books? No. I find it hard to decide a fave, but I love Kindred. You know what? I liked Kindred. I did read Kindred. And Parable of the Sower. And Fledgling. And Say Anything. Love her. And love her and you way too much. Well, Mukbang, as you know, one of the great unfortunate things of my life was when I was working on the Chronicles of Narnia, and I've told the story before. We were 14 months into a 2-year contract, and Disney just pulled the plug on us in midstream of the project for no reason was given to us. I found out later why. It was stuff going on internally that had nothing to do with our work or what we were doing. But one of the things that we were doing, and I've said this before, was we were doing a documentary of writers, science fiction, fantasy, horror writers, who were influenced by C.S. Lewis. And Octavia Butler was one of the people we interviewed. We did one of the last interviews. For those of you who don't know, Octavia Butler is a black female science fiction writer. And she's amazing. And she passed away way too young. I believe she died, I don't know if it was a year or two, a couple of years after we interviewed her. She slipped and fell, like going to get her mail on concrete or something. It was just tragic. And one of the great, we interviewed Terry Brooks. We interviewed Clive Barker. It was going to be a great documentary. I don't think it was particularly sexy for Disney, but it was sexy for us at my company, Ludovico Technique, working on it, because it was great fun to do the interviews, and we were traveling around the country, and I wasn't able to interview Octavia Butler, unfortunately. But that documentary never saw the light of day. One day I would love to get that footage back from Disney and do something with it, because it was really, really interesting. But yes, I did read Kindred, and I have read Fledgling as well. And I've read other books by her. I don't have any of her books in hardcover, though. I should rectify that. I should get one. Phoenix for Joker or Driver for Marriage Story. Who wins the Oscar? You know what? I think, look, River Phoenix's performance was extraordinary. And I don't know if he's going to win. And Adam Driver was great in Marriage Story as well, but I probably would take... I'd have to give it, I think, Phoenix, because much showier performance. How wacky would it be that the last two actors... Well, actually, that's not the last two, but two actors to have played the same role would both win Best Actor Oscars? I wonder if that's ever happened in Oscar history. I don't know. Farky50 says, Weird Science 1985. What do you like about it? I love Weird Science. Chet, the older brother, played by Bill Paxton. It's fun. What is it? Kelly LeBrock, she's pretty good too. Now, Weird Science is it's a wacky teen comedy that combines John Hughes and science fiction. What's Not to Love? And it's got a Danny Elfman song, an Oingo Boingo song, right? What's Not to Love? Galactic Train Spotting says it's possible to synthesize excited bromine in an argon matrix. That, sir, is if you're a sir, that is a deep cut line from Real Genius. I love that. Nicely done. Very nicely done. Yes. If you guys haven't seen Real Genius, you really need to see Real Genius. Wow. Guess what? I didn't even realize this. I have a letter from Willow Yang. Yes, I do. Greetings, Rob. I'll just let Willow take it away. Prior to watching The Rise of Skywalker, I had joked that if Reylo happens in the movie, I'm going to walk out of the theater. Well, let's just say that it's fortunate the movie at least had the decency to wait until the last 20 minutes to pull out that ship and smack me across the face with it. And to its credit, it was a relatively light slap, so I remained in my seat until the end. In all seriousness, however, well, maybe not all, but more seriousness, I don't actually hate Reylo as much as I claim to do. I can see the reasons as to why people have been pushing this ship since The Force Awakens. Moreover, I'm not one to police other people's ships. People like what they like, and I respect that. But because Joshua Levesque asked for it, here are my personal reasons as to why I don't really care for Reylo. 1. A good girl turning a bad girl to the light is a trope that's been stale since the 1001 Arabian Nights. For those of you who aren't familiar with the original 1001 Arabian Nights, it's basically a series of stories within stories, with the framing overarching story being centered on two brothers that are kings who both discover that their wives have been cheating on them. Of course, instead of examining themselves to see what they might have done wrong that would have caused their partners to cheat, they quickly arrive at the obvious conclusion that all women are evil whores. Thus, to stop his wives from ever cheating on him again, one of the kings would marry a woman, sleep with her, and execute her the next morning. Rinse and repeat. Instead of getting dragged out of his palace and torn into pieces by an angry, revolting mob, a brave, intelligent young woman decides to take it onto herself to heal this misogynistic, deranged tyrant. Damaged, misunderstood, sensitive man, by teaching him, through a series of stories, that women aren't so bad. Of course, Arabian Nights was written hundreds of years ago under a completely different social context, so it gets a pass. This is the 21st century, however, and I'm honestly just so sick of the trope of the misunderstood bad guy who just needs the loving, nurturing care of a virginal young woman to turn him around. Excuse my language, fuck that. To quote Billy Butcher, spank the bastards when they get out of line. Life's not easy for anyone. You break bad and you go on a murder spree. I don't care what tragic past you might have, you're going to get a sword, bullet, phaser, lightsaber, whatever weapon exists in your universe, through the head. 2. There are other types of love than romantic love. Yes, I know. It's a shock to those who learn all their life lessons from movies, but romantic love isn't the only type of love that exists. I couldn't really get into the original Star Wars trilogy. While I've grown to appreciate them a bit more over the years, knowing now the context under which the movies were made, I still can't love them nearly as much as something like Lord of the Rings. However, in spite of my burning hatred towards the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, one thing that I actually liked about the movie is the decision that Vader makes at the end. Vader was not turned by romantic love. Indeed, from the prequels, it appears that it's romantic love that caused him to fall in the first place. Instead, he was turned by parental love, the love that he has for his son. Maybe it's just cultural differences, but I've always valued familial love and friendship over romantic love. I want movies to feature more types of love and relationships between people other than some sappy romance that has been done a million times already. I don't want a villainous character to turn good because he's fallen for some girl. And why can't the male and female leads of the story find kinship and camaraderie with each other without having to rub their body parts together? Come on, have some creativity. 3. Romances in comic books and fantasy movies generally suck. I enjoyed the relationship between Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor. I liked Pepper and Tony. I liked Spider-Man and Gwen. Deadpool and Vanessa were great. You get the strap on and let's make a super baby. Hey-o! They are, however, exceptions to the rule. Romances in fantasy movies are generally poorly developed, miserable to watch, and detract from the overall story and use of screen time. Again, one thing that I appreciated about the original trilogy was that it subverted tropes by not giving the main hero, Luke, a love interest, unless you want to count Leia. Rey does not need a love interest. That is just a distraction. She should be focusing 100% of her attention on defeating the First Order, Final Order, Palpatine, whatever enemy the story decides to throw in, and the movie needs to focus on the main task at hand and not get sideswept by something like that horrid romance between Finn and Rose in The Last Jedi that went absolutely nowhere. It was a complete waste of the characters and the actors' talents, in my opinion. 4. It perpetuates annoying stereotypes about women. This is closely related to my first point, in that as sick and tired as I am of the trope of women being loving, caring nurturers who will turn some a-hole to the light, I'm equally as sick and tired of the good girl falling for the bad boy cliche. Now, I will acknowledge, as with probably most stereotypes, there's a grain of truth to it. However, when it's played out over and over again and again, it just becomes eye-rolling. Yes, some women do find moody, damaged, and somewhat dangerous men to be appealing, but just as there are other types of love besides romantic love, there are other types of things that women find appealing that, unfortunately, don't receive nearly as much attention. 5. It's about time that slash fiction gets more recognition. Which leads me right to my final point, and yes, I'm not going to miss out on the opportunity to bring up my favorite subject. What are this other types of things that women find appealing? Hot man-on-man action. Women's attraction to bad boys is considered common knowledge, but you'd often hear guys in real life whine, "Why do girls always go for the bad boy? Why don't they go out with a nice guy like me?" How often do you hear a man ask, "Why do girls like watching men make hot, steamy love to each other? Why do they fantasize so much about attractive men French kissing and plowing each other through the back door and having mind-blowing prostate orgasms and getting pregnant?" Wow, Willow. Okay, maybe I'm getting a little carried away now. Oh, no, you're not. No. I celebrate National Women's Day proudly every year. All I'm trying to say is that it's about time we give more spotlight to other types of ships. I'm not an avid shipper myself, but given the choice, I'd much rather read some smutty fanfics of Poe and Finn or Anakin and Obi-Wan than Reylo. Not that I have, of course. Next time some guy wants to entice a girl, maybe try talking a little Hanagram or Spurk or Destial or Sassonaru or Thorky. Wow. Or whatever franchise she's into, and who knows, maybe both of you will get enjoyment out of the journey into the strange and wondrous world of slash fiction. My apologies, I might have gone off course with my last point. I just couldn't resist sneaking it in. We all need a little more slash fiction in our lives. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. May the force be with you, Willow. You know what, Willow? I have to tell you, plowing each other through the back door and having mind-blowing prostate orgasms might be the favorite sentence I've read on this show. So kudos to you, Willow. That is why I love you so much. This was a great letter. Why we don't need Reylo should go right next to our columnist, Allie State, who writes the Burnettwork.net's column, The Feminerd Gaze. Go check it out on the website. She wrote an article, Why We Need Reylo, and I would really hope that these letters are both read together. The counterpoints in them are astonishing. And, Willow, you're somebody I want to meet now more than ever, if you know what I'm saying. Ha, ha, ha. Well done. Well done, Willow. I can't. I'm so glad I don't have to worry about COPPA on this show. Mom, what's Rob talking about? Mukbang Reviews says, of the Dark Tower series, which was your favorite? Mine was Drawing of the Three. You know what? Okay. The Wizard of Glass. I like the Dark Tower a lot, but I have to say it's the first book in the series. Because I bought a hardcover, the Donald F. Grant hardcover of Dark Tower when it very first came out. And I was just taken aback by Roland Deschain and the whole, it was the first book, the first sentence of the book, chase the man in black across the desert. I forget it was so different from what Stephen King had written. And I don't think the first Dark Tower book is the best Dark Tower book, but I loved encountering it for the very first time. And I want to say that I got it I got the hardcover when I was in the first year of high school. But I really, by the way, all of my first edition hardcover Dark Tower books were in my storage locker. But I think I'd have to go with the first Dark Tower, just because, again, as a Stephen King fan, it was so different. He was going after attacking a different subject matter than he'd ever covered before. Although some short stories had certain feels of what the Dark Tower brought out, but I have to go with the first book. I mean, what he expanded it into was pretty great, but I really liked the first book a lot, just because it was so unexpected and so different. I didn't know what it was going to be. So yeah, did not know. Jashan Cater has a letter. I love that name, Jashan, as you know. Hello, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. I wanted to write to you again, but unfortunately this letter will not be about Star Trek the Motion Picture. I've not been able to find the director's cut, only the regular version online, but I will get to it. When I do, I will report back to you. This letter, though, is going to be about the television show Mr. Robot. I finally had the chance to finish the fourth and final season, and man, oh man, this is a very special show. You often talk about authorship, and this show is all about authorship. USA Network allowed Sam Esmail to fully showcase his vision within these 4 seasons of Mr. Robot. I will be brief, and I will not mention any spoilers. You shouldn't, because the end of the show is pretty mind-blowing. Just in case our fellow imagination connoisseurs have not had the chance to see it, we, the audience, follow our main character, Elliot Anderson, a computer hacker dedicated to take down an evil corporation called E-Corp. Just FYI, he can sometimes be an unreliable narrator. That's the truth. With his fellow team of hackers, they also come across a treacherous villain named White Rose. But this story is much more than that. It hits on so many different levels with elements regarding friendship, loneliness, drug abuse, mental illness, but most importantly, the human connection. It also shows us a reflection of what our society can or may become. The direction of Sam Esmail is masterful, with one of the episodes from the 3rd season filmed as one-shot scene for the entire episode, to an episode with literally no dialogue in the 4th season. Sam Esmail was able to pull it off and make it one of the most intense episodes. To top it off, the music in the show is incredible. Being played and placed in certain moments really helped match the mood, with music from The Cure, Daft Punk, Phil Collins, Sonic Youth, Neil Diamond, and much more. I'm not even doing it justice. There's a lot of music in the show. But my favorite is a band called M83. They played their music in the 1st season and also in the final season. Well, I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Have you seen the show or planning to watch it? I'm now curious about the next project from Sam Esmail, but for now, I'm just going to enjoy this moment. He nailed it. From beginning to end, in my opinion. All right, that's all. Have a great day and an even better year. I hope Gilbert and Tallulah are well. Jashan K. P.S. I forgot to talk about Mr. Robot. I guess I'll just let you imagination connoisseurs tune in and find out who this character is. Well, Jashan, yes, I like Mr. Robot a great deal. It's an amazing show, and I have to say it was kind of mind-blowing, especially the end. Now, if you haven't seen Sam Esmail's series, I think it's on Amazon, Homecoming with Julia Roberts. I really like that too. Now, I don't know if you have, but check it out. No, I thought Mr. Robot was incredible. And again, it had a lot to say about our current social media drenched world. By the way, M83, the band that you referred to, M83 scored Oblivion. And let me throw in a piece of their music. I'm going to throw in a piece of their music. Just because it's cool. So here you go. I'm putting it in the live chat. There's a link to some M83 music. I'm a big fan of M83. I have the Oblivion soundtrack. And yes, it was great hearing them used on the show. No, I think Mr. Robot completely subverts expectations. You don't know where the show is going to go. Yeah, and now that it's over, there's spoilers all over the internet. If you've not watched Mr. Robot, it's very worthwhile. If you like The Matrix, it's not like The Matrix, but if you like The Matrix, there's a lot of the same kinds of themes, and it really, especially later on, gets into identity and who we are, who are you, and I can't recommend it highly enough. And it was very surprising, especially when you start out, you don't know. By the way, mad props to Christian Slater in the show, too. And, of course, Rami Malek is really where people started to recognize him. But it's definitely something that if you like science fiction and if you like progressive work, Mr. Robot is highly, highly recommended. And, by the way, totally sticks the landing, at least in my mind. Totally sticks the landing. Oh, yes, I didn't I say that? I said, what is it, 21st or something? Jamie, yes, for everybody, we are going to have I'll do a special show in addition to Robservations, the Robservations book club. I think we should. Are we going to read Hyperion? Why not? You know what though? I can't. This month I'm too damn busy. Let's move it to February for Valentine's Day. Whatever day Valentine's Day comes on, we'll do it the day after. February 15th. February 15th, I'm changing it. It'll be the first day of the Robservations book club. Everybody has to read Hyperion. Thank you for reminding me. I very much appreciate that, Jamie. Absolutely. Bank on it. That's what we'll do. Fantastic. I love that idea. So, yes. So, the 15th of February, Hyperion. Dan Simmons, Hyperion. That's what we're going to do. So yeah, that was good. That was good. Let's see. I got a letter from Thomas Bertoldi. Bertoldi. Rob, have you ever wondered what your favorite childhood movies were growing up? Have you ever wondered what your favorite childhood movies were growing up? Or what decade of film was your favorite? Loving movies is something we all do, isn't it? I would go on to say, my fellow imagination connoisseurs, and Rob, what is your favorite decade of films? Do we love the 80s more? Yes, I do love the 80s when it comes to films. Before I do go into this letter further, I will say hello to fellow connoisseurs and Rob, hoping everyone is having a swell day. I want to just write about the 90s when it comes to film. Call this a love letter to the 90s. To begin, let's take our time machine back in time. Marty just witnessed Doc Brown struck by lightning, and he realizes the only person that could ever help him is Doc Brown. Marty gets a letter, so he opens it. Doc Brown is back in the Wild Wild West, so Marty goes back in time to save his friends. Back to the Future 3 has always been one of my favorites in the 90s. Also in that same year was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They really brought our favorite turtles to life. The movie was full of pizza and one shell of a great time. That's what you wrote. All because they did some amazing puppetry work with the movie to bring such wonderful characters to life. Also in 1990 were movies like Home Alone, Kindergarten Cop, Dances with Wolves, and Ghost. We also fell in love with A Pretty Woman. In 1991, again, we go for more great movies. Terminator was one of the best movies done in the 90s, but then Terminator 2 happened and the villain became the hero, and we loved the thrill ride of it all. We also got Robin Hood with Kevin Costner and Hook with Robin Williams, which I've maintained is the worst Steven Spielberg movie, but okay. But how can we not just love City Slickers, Hot Shots, or The Addams Family? It's just the 1990s was quickly becoming my favorite decade of movies. 1992 again proves my point in many ways with movies like A Few Good Men, Basic Instinct, and Sister Act. I liked all three of those, actually. But it doesn't stop there, because in 93, a younger me was struck dumb by what I might call my favorite movie of the 90s, Jurassic Park. We got to see a book by the same name become a truly amazing adventure about a theme park full of dinosaurs. We also got to see Robin Williams show us how amazing he was in Mrs. Doubtfire. Our eyes were open with Schindler's List in Philadelphia. In 94, we got The Lion King. It made us cry. Forrest Gump showed us stupid is as stupid does. And True Lies was really, really good and sexy in a good way. But Speed was my favorite of this year. 95 gave us Toy Story, Apollo 13, and GoldenEye. It gave us Seven, Waterworld, and Jumanji. And 96 just got even more heated up. Independence Day happens, Twister blew us away, Mission Impossible becomes a movie, and Jerry Maguire tells us with a delightful scream, "Show me the money." But we do also love The Rock. 97 gets a sequel to Jurassic Park and then Titanic. Men in Black just proves Will Smith is a star, and Air Force One quickly becomes my favorite of that year. 98, another year, that's when we got this idea that oil drillers can save the entire world from Armageddon. Saving Private Ryan sails into my favorite movie of this year. Godzilla roars, and A Bug's Life became something I grew to enjoy. Then high school happens in 99. Wow, all that before high school. Crazy. So does a new Star Wars movie, The Phantom Menace, Toy Story 2, and The Matrix. The Mummy is just epic, and for many reasons, it became my favorite movie of that year. I hope you all enjoyed a trip back to the 90s with me. Once again, always your friend and fellow connoisseur, Thomas B. Well, Thomas, thank you for that list of movies from the 90s. All good. You know, I maintain that I think most decades, if you go back and you look, you can come up with a list of a bunch of great movies. Everyone's always talking about, the movies, not because they weren't. I don't think it's true. I think you go back and look back in time, I think there's a lot of great movies out there, and I think that's fantastic. I will have to come up with my list. I would say right off the top, that's probably the 70s. My favorite movies are probably in the 70s, because just off the top of my head, between The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 and A Clockwork Orange and Barry Lyndon, Network, all that jazz, Star Wars, Alien, Dawn of the Dead, Phantasm, Halloween, Logan's Run, Rollerball, Zardoz, Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker. I know, right? Can you believe it? There's so many. The 70s probably are my favorite decade. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Rocky. But yeah, I think the 70s. That's not to say every other decade doesn't have tons of movies that are my favorites, but those are probably my favorites. But yeah, I do love that. So that is a great list, sir. A fine list. Well, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind people, once again, I will bring an end to episode 209 of Robservations, the show about something. And I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody for contributing. I want to thank my great moderators, who are fantastic, for moderating the live chat, which is, of course, my moderators, starting with the great and powerful the mayor of Riverdale, Iowa, Mr. Mike Bodden. Of course, Detective Jim, who was once a real detective and a cop, so he keeps you on the straight and narrow. The great Greg Smith, who's not only building a 1-to-1 scale snow speeder in his garage, but he can build houses with his bare hands. And then, of course, Jordy Lyons and Louis Yu, the two new members of the Post-Geek Singularity. And you know who's lurking here? A former moderator, Terry, the Sheriff of Nottingham. It's good to have him back. Good to have him in the chat. I hope he enjoyed himself here. I'm sure he must. If you heard Willow's letter, I know you had a great time, because I was feeling all tingly. I mean, come on. And we had Willow Yang's letter. So I would say today was a very effective day here at Robservations, the show about something. We've had a lot of new subscribers. I want to thank all of you subscribers for subscribing. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel. It's been terrific doing that. Hopefully, I'll be able to, I'm going to be upgrading equipment. I come from the John Campea School of YouTube, in that you should provide the viewers with the best experience you can, and I'm trying to do that by upgrading things. This camera, I don't know if you can't white balance it, and with the lights that are oscillating here, I'm always given a blue glow. But hey. So I want to say thank you all for being here. I will be back here tomorrow, probably. Well, I got to find out when the Seahawks are playing. Let me find out. That's what the great thing about the internet is. Let's find out when are, in fact, the Seahawks playing tomorrow. Let's see. Seahawks versus Eagles. That will be tomorrow at 1:40 p.m. Of course, it has to be tomorrow at 1:40 p.m. So once again, I'm going to have my show on during the Seahawks game, which is actually kind of fun because then I don't, sometimes I'll find out who won, but I'll probably be here. I mean, maybe I'll just come on at noon. Maybe we'll just plan noon tomorrow. But watch Twitter. I'll figure it out. But we'll be here. We're coming back. Ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind people of every shape, size, color, creed, whatever your persuasion is, it's Robservations is a place where you're all welcome. I want to thank you for being here. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I say, have a better day.